I think there's the bits that for me is the focus between, I think, the school strategic plan and looking at the short-term goals to the long-term ones. At the very beginning, when I guess I was given the responsibility of directing the school's I think technology growth and future, I presented a 5-year plan. And you know, there was lots of little small wins we had to have, and there were lots of big things we had to fix. And I think it's trying to balance out the, you know, making sure you're making the right decisions today that's not going to adversely affect your tomorrow or your next month or your next year. It's never perfect. Like, you know, I'll be honest with you, in the first 5 years of the school's journey, we made some mistakes. But we could attribute it wasn't that we weren't calculated and measured, that sometimes things don't go perfectly in according to plan. Like just as a, you know, as a small one, you know, bringing in Office 365 to the school was, I think, the biggest first challenge that I had, because this school was bring your own device. They were using lots of different platforms, but there was no strategy behind what we were trying to achieve. So I think that's what I presented to the college, and it's sticking to that, and it's having people going, yeah, but I like using this, but they couldn't see the big picture in it. And then as time went by and people became more on board in understanding, and I think having buy-in to the school's strategy, staff become more confident and like to explore and try. And it's sometimes they come to you with, I want a product, rather than I'm trying to achieve an experience. And it's unpacking that element of it to try and I think engage, reward and promote the idea, but sometimes what they want isn't necessarily going to be for the benefit of the school. So it's trying to really, it's re-educating people. It's getting easier, but I would say the first 3 years were the hardest in trying to get everyone on board. Whereas now we have the opposite. We've got lots of people on board, and now we're focusing on making sure the infrastructure is right. The services that we have are efficient. It's moving to that sort of different model where we're now a faster moving sort of ship, and we've got to be effective in the way we execute things. So it's really good that the expectation of what people have now when they walk into a classroom or engage with their class or undertake an idea, that we've got these standards in place that our staff are expecting. The fact that I'm in a position where I can instrument change, that's what I love the most about this job, and building something new that, you know, not necessarily something that was broken, but introducing something that gives people the light bulb moments, that, you know, creates opportunities for our young people to learn in different ways, to gather new experiences. You know, the fact that our staff retention rate has diminished. Like we don't lose a lot of staff anymore, because they sometimes look at other places and go, well, the grass is not greener somewhere else, or if I do leave here, then I'm sacrificing the things that I like doing because another organization does it differently or doesn't do it to the standard that we expect. I think the fact that, you know, we've built capacity in our staff and students in such a confident way, that's what I like the most. And I think what was really evident was our period of remote learning in 2020. For us, it was business continuity. We didn't lose anything outside of the face-to-face interaction. We're all in the same room at the same time. We were able to engage in everything that we did in a traditional classroom from home, but we did it with 24 hours notice. Yep, off we go. And it was more about planning towards being effective rather than scrambling to find a solution to get by. And I think in all of that preparation for the 3-4 years prior to 2020, we had inadvertently built capacity in our staff to do things that they adapted, they changed, they evolved, they were progressive, they found new ideas in remote learning that was then able to be very widely spread across other teaching disciplines. So I think the things that we'd been building towards, we saw the benefit of it when we had to react to something. Yeah, look, I think that the core guts of it is change management in anything. Like if you're gonna use technology to solve something, it's got to be done with the right planning, the right strategy, the right meaning, and the right philosophy behind it, so that we can go through those minefields that might pop up that don't appear. So as an example, for 3 or 4 years, we had staff buying 3D printers. And we got to a point, there were so many around the school, there was no strategy behind how do we do it well? How do we share that resource, the knowledge, how they serviced? Because the more you become dependent on something, the more critical it is how you service and support it. So we had to sort of pull it all back in, do an audit, and have a better understanding of what the expectation is from 3D printers, that then come up with a strategy of, well, how often do we renew them? What are the policies behind them working in the evening? How are they serviced? How are they supported? Do we print our own filament? Like all those kinds of things started to come into it. And I think having experience in changing things and bringing in new processes means that these ideas were more welcomed by staff to go, well, yeah, you're right. We need to be more strategic when we do things. I think the standard tech that we've got would be, let's talk about an RE class, which you would think, in terms of its traditional methodology of teaching, you wouldn't expect a lot of technology in a class that, engages in the delivery of religious education. We've been able to engage in virtual reality kits where, students can engage and interact with virtual tours on different places of worship around the world. Things that they were never able to do outside of look at it in a textbook. So that's an available resource. We've got, 3 VR kits running across 3 sites, and we've got lots of resources, but they connect with the classrooms. So, you can understand virtual reality is very first person, but the fact that we've got our classrooms with triple screens where what that person is seeing, the whole room can see because of the way the room engages with the technology as well. So we've heavily used VR in our 3-screen Vivi rooms. And it's been really engaging to see, because you've got an audience sitting there watching someone with a set of goggles on, but they can't see what that person's seeing. Whereas at least now you have that sort of, I guess, backseat driver kind of thing when it comes to VR. And that's been really engaging. So that's pretty much your base level standard that you'd expect in spaces like that. In 2016, we started looking at every available wireless solution there was. Our dream back then was we were spending an exorbitant amount of money on HDMI cables. They were breaking off the walls, they were breaking each other, they were breaking the cables, they were damaging laptops, and we just thought it wasn't a smart, sustainable option. So we started looking at those solutions, but we didn't have, it's interesting because we had no conceptual understanding of how our classrooms now look in 2016. So we looked at everything that was on the market, and obviously Vivi was the one that sort of presided over everything else, and I'm happy to sort of explain sort of where we were at with that philosophy behind it. When we looked at everything, I think the big thing with Vivi the big thing with the solution for being disconnecting from the front of the room was it had to be reliable. That was the number one thing that we had to really stick to, because whatever solution we presented to our teachers, it had to guarantee that it was going to work every single day. That when they clicked that button to present, there was never going to be an issue outside of the extenuating circumstances that it was going to fail. And that if it did, we knew that if that solution failed once, twice, 3 times, then staff would not be on board with wanting to use it because they can't rely on it. So having Vivi as, I would say, the only solution that is unique in the way it interacts with your environment versus being a Windows environment, everything else was very dependent on the update of the Windows operating system, the display driver software that was running through. If it was incompatible with the units that we were testing, there was nothing you could do about it. And the other big thing was management. Like a lot of the other solutions didn't have that central management system where you could really oversee what was going on, control and fix from the click of a keyboard, rather than going in there, having to reset the box, check what's going on, use your computer. Wasting a lot of time for us was what we were experiencing with a lot of other available solutions on the market. And it just seemed to us that Vivi was doing the complete opposite to all of that. You weren't depending on other things being updated for it to work. It was sustaining its sort of own reliability, its updates, and it didn't matter what you connected it to. So, for us, it's anything and everything. Whereas a lot of the other solutions were either specific Mac OS or Windows, or a little bit of both, or hit and miss. So for us, that's sort of, how the journey started in 2016 to in 2017, we then hit our first trial room, which had 3 screens. We were testing that environment. We tried a new idea, and that idea in 2017 started to release our general purpose flexible learning area buildings, where 3 screens, breakout spaces, and we've kept evolving from there. So yeah, it's become one of those things where it's part of people's everyday conversation. So now the phrases are, oh, let's put it on Vivi. So we started off with a solution that's going to take away HDMI cables and adapters as well, because at the same time, laptops were changing from VGA to HDMI to USB-C. So we kept changing. We not only needed cables, we needed adapters. So in 2016 and 17, for us, the Vivi solved that silly problem of us having to waste money on cables and adapters and fixing things that should never have needed to be broken. Now we're team teaching, we're joining rooms, we've got digital signage. We share one classroom to the next. It's the options that we've now got from where we started. We didn't think in 2016 would be where we are now. So it's really changed the way we pave, the way we do things. I mean, even to the point we had an open day 2 weeks ago. Vivi was the probably key delivery point for everything we were trying to sell and advertise across the school. So we had every Vivi unit pumping out anything we could. So our marketing team now has a lot of work to do when it comes to creating content for our signage. So, and that varies from things that work in the classroom to things that are at reception to open spaces. Now we've got different sort of brands of what we're trying to get out there for the different target audiences that we have. So we're really taking more of a marketing approach of how we're engaging our community in different ways. Staff's perception of it is that it becomes a very go-to thing of what we're dealing with. But our problem is that we don't have Vivi everywhere yet. And that's probably a big project that we're undertaking to try and saturate it as much as possible. I think where we made a greedy mistake in the early days, and I'm sort of saying this because it's affecting our teaching staff, because the success our staff are having with Vivi is also our failure by not having Vivi. Because there are some traditional classrooms where people go into because they're timetabled all over the school, and then there's some campuses that are imbalanced. So for us is that it's, I guess, our success is our demise because we don't have it everywhere yet. But I think where we made a mistake was we went, I want 3 screens everywhere. So we were really trying to fit that cookie cutter approach into, we've got 3 screen success, I want to put it into every room. What we had to learn was it sometimes geographically is not possible because some buildings just don't have the facilities for me to put 3 screens strategically. So we've had to be more realistic to go, well, sometimes a triple screen either isn't practical or isn't realistic, as long as we've got unengaging interface that disconnects the teacher from the front, but reconnects the whole class to each other by displaying and collaborating their work. So I think that's where our staff have really sort of, said we need to be moving in that direction and we can't do it fast enough. So that's probably been the big thing that our staff have talked about with Vivi, is that we need more of it. So I can speak from experience that my senior maths classes, so I teach maths methods. And I was really trying to push the boundaries of taking a subject that was very traditional in its chalk and talk, that there was lots of, teacher-driven work. And I found that by doing that, you had to get through the content. But sometimes what you're expecting your students to undertake and do is that independent experience and being able to take the knowledge that you've acquired and solve a problem that you've never seen before. And I think that, one directional kind of instruction all the time doesn't work. So I would use Vivi a lot in my classes to mix it up, let the kids engage in the work, create sort of like that workshop environment where it's quite chaotic when you are someone walking past, but there's a buzz of activity and work. And it's interesting that my students would see the room configured in that workshop style setup. And at the start, they were quite apprehensive and didn't like the change, but then they started to really embrace it to the point where they were counting down to when that style of lesson was coming up again, and they would really gear up for it. That would actually influence me in terms of how would I flip the information to prepare them for that style of a workshop learning. So I would then start to get to the days prior going, right, it's workshop day coming up. This is a kind of activities that we're going to be engaging in. So I'd give them the information a little bit earlier so that they're more prepared to break away to a screen, workshop together, present what they want, write on a window, draw on the board, really mix it up and do things different. I found that when I started getting better at that style of teaching, my students were becoming more confident when it was getting to their exam prep, that they'd really experience things by trying, stumbling, failing, fixing, rather than being told how to fix it. They were learning along the way. It did mean I'd have to break away from, the traditional teaching time, but they were learning it in another way, and I had to be confident that they were getting there. So it changes your workflow, but once you start winning and succeeding in that kind of style of teaching, you can't go back. And that's where I find it difficult if I'm teaching in a non-Vivi enabled classroom. You sometimes don't know until it's what we've learned till it's too late. So I'm going to reverse it and go, now we're looking and saying that a lot of the technologies that we haven't been able to implement yet is because our infrastructure doesn't give us the opportunity to do it well. So for instance, now our standard classrooms would require at least a dozen access points so that we can connect all our technology into it. So now when we build rooms, we're putting them with, a good 15 to 20 data points so that if more technology comes in, we're ready for it. So that, I've got an abundant number of ports in my switches. I've got infrastructure sitting there in the roof that's waiting for technology to sort of come in. So we learned the hard way that we're spending more money on retrofitting than we are in terms of future-proofing our infrastructure to prepare for technology we haven't seen yet. And then when we've got that makeup in our philosophy, it means it's easy to see something new at a conference and go, you know what, we're going to try that in the classroom and see how it operates. A new one coming in is that we've just acquired some funding to get 3 portable video conferencing units, so that in theory I could take a video conferencing unit into an FLA classroom. The students are learning Japanese. Now, Japan and Australia have got a 1 hour time difference between the two. What we used to do is, every year our Japanese study tour, 30 kids would go over to Japan for 2 weeks and learn the culture, go to Japanese classes. Unfortunately, now we can't do that. So now in a Vivi enabled 3-screen classroom, I can take a video conferencing unit and then really reconnect the core part of what that program was about and connect a classroom in Japan to a classroom here.